We are live. It is 6:42. I'm here early. Tonight we are going to talk about excuse me, turbo Hemis. And not specifically, I mean, a turbo Hemi responds the same way as every other turbo motor does. The Hemi is not, there are a lot of guys think that this motor loves boost. They all love boost. And they all respond the same way. There are a few that have like a VTEC Honda, a K series and F series, those kinds of things where they do better than the formula. But for the most part, you do an NA motor, it makes a certain amount of power, you add boost and you do it correctly, it doubles the power at 14.7 pounds. That's kind of what happens. That's the kind of thing that we expect. If it doesn't do that, then we figure out, oh, okay, well, the intercooler's not working, it's a restriction, too much exhaust pressure, not enough timing, we don't have the right kind of fuel. We look at the reasons why. It's just a good thing to use to figure out whether or not your setup is doing kind of what you would expect. And if it's not, then you can go kind of chase down why it is doing that. And if it's doing more than that, you're like, hey, I don't want to find that out. Actually, you do want to find that out, because then you can figure out, how to apply that technology, whatever it is, to the next buildup that you do. So it's good to know that as well. But on this Hemi, what I want to do is you guys need to look at the thumbnail. So if you are here and you just breeze right by the thumbnail, you need to take a look at the thumbnail, because the question is, what are the 5 things that are wrong with this Hemi in this photo? So we have the 5.7 Hemi. The one that's on there, I think, is a 5.7. It might have been the stroker one. We have I think that turbo that's on right now is a comp turbo, is an 80 millimeter one. So we've done a good bit over 1,000 horsepower with that. Got a big exhaust on it. It's a single turbo. What we did on this one that was unusual was we did use factory exhaust manifolds, which that's not unusual, but we had them aiming back, and then we made a Y pipe and then came forward with a, kind of bent them forward and then had a single tube come forward, and then we mounted the turbo on that. Just a different kind of Y pipe, but that's not really one of the things. You could count that if you wanted, but I don't think it really had any effect on, I don't think it hurt the power at all. And those stock manifolds that we use were not the Dodge Ram manifolds in the trucks, because those are not good. Those would definitely hurt power. These are the SRT8 ones, which are very, very good. I think that they're at least the equivalent of an LS, cast truck manifold, and possibly even better than that. They worked fairly well. I remember comparing them to headers, and they were pretty good. They're probably a lot more like a mid-length header than a stock exhaust manifold. So they worked really well. And the restriction in the turbo thing is usually the turbo anyways, because all that exhaust has got to join together and feed into it. But there are 5 things that are wrong with this photo. And so we'll talk about those tonight. We'll start out let's see, we'll have a poll though. I got to get a poll going, because otherwise I forget. We get to talking and chatting and doing car guy stuff, and I never put the poll up. Okay, is a Gen 3 Hemi a good motor to run boost on? People think differently about the Hemi than they do the LS for some reason. So it'll be interesting to see. The first thing I want to point out is, if you take a look at the photo on the thumbnail, and I want you guys to list stuff if you guys have looked at the photo, tell me what you think is wrong there. But this is a test I did long ago. And the first thing that I can see in looking at that, because now, after it's been years, maybe 10 years or more, and I'm looking at some of the things that I did, I'm like, why would I do that? Why would I do that thing? It's glaringly obvious to me now, and maybe not, maybe it wasn't then, or maybe it was the only thing that I had going, and so we had to run a test. So it's got to be that way. There was a lot of that. But on this one, we had a big 3.5 or 4 inch exhaust on this turbo, but all we had was a small section. Excuse me. All we had was a small section of that. And that's not ideal. It's not that it's not ideal for flow. It's fine for flow. In fact, the short exhaust probably flows more. But it's bad for 2 reasons. One, if you look at the way that the turbo is configured and aimed, the exhaust aims right over at the door on the dyno where we open and close, where we go get into the dyno cell. That's not good. You want the exhaust aimed back toward the back of the dyno cell where the big fan is evacuating all the exhaust and all the airflow that goes through there because it refills the air in the dyno and draws it out. That's how we get the exhaust out and we get fresh air in so that the thing can breathe and also get all that bad air out. If you don't have the fan on and you try to run, you'll know, because the power will be way down, because you'll get all the EGR and there's a lot, there are a lot fewer oxygen molecules relative to the volume. And so it doesn't make as much power. So there's two things wrong with this short exhaust. One, we didn't have a bend to have it go back toward the back, which I think was a mistake. And the other thing is the short section of tubing, also with the O2 sensor, you don't really get a good reading, even though we put it, roughly in the middle or so. Somebody could argue that the temperature is going to be bad for the O2, but I'm less worried about that. But because the exhaust is so big and the length is so short, that you just get reversion, especially at idle and stuff. And so you don't ever really get a good O2 reading. So if you're trying to tune it, you're just kind of spinning your wheels. It's difficult. So a longer piece of exhaust would have cured that. A longer piece of exhaust and even a 90-degree bend, or configuring the turbo completely differently with the intercooler and all that stuff, so that we're looking into the impeller. And that's normally the way that we configure turbos, is that we can see the impeller spinning, from behind the safety glass in the console room, and when we're looking into the dyno cell. And then that way the exhaust just comes straight out of the turbo and goes back to the fan, the evacuation fans, as God and nature intended. So that's one of the problems. The other problem is that there's, on this single turbo that I talked about earlier, the way that we route the tubing to go from the stock exhaust manifolds and then bend and then come forward and then mount the turbo on that, there's no support on that. So the heaviest part of that, is the turbo itself. And when you get that exhaust manifold, not the manifolds themselves, because they're bolted on, they're pretty solid. But when you get the exhaust tubing from the manifold up to the turbo, when you get that really hot, all that stuff wants to sag. And it did. And so the only thing stopping it from sagging is the connection of the intercooler to the throttle body. And we've run across this problem before. I remember doing the twins on the modular Fords with the HP Performance ones too, that the way that we had it configured, there's so much tubing length and it just gets hot and wants to, kind of sway over. So that was one of the other problems. We definitely needed some sort of, structure arm coming off of one of the cylinder heads or somewhere attached to the tubing, just to kind of hold it in place. And that's pretty normal for you see kits like that. One of the simple things was that, and it's kind of hard to see from behind the intercooler, but there's no electric water pump on this. And what we did, and it has a mechanical water pump on it, but it's not being driven. And so what we do, and what is common when we run particularly boat engines, like jet boat engines and stuff, is that we force feed water from the dyno into the motor, and then it just exits out the back into the tank. That's a common thing. The thing that I don't like about that is that we don't get to decide what temperature the water is in the motor, and it's always like super cold. It's whatever the temperature of the water in the tank is. And so it doesn't get, we want to get some temperature in it. So it might be 80 or 90 degrees and it's not 140. And then we could also adjust that up to whatever we want, 200 degrees if we wanted to do it and circulate it, if we had a water pump on there or electric water pump. The electric water pump is nice because when you shut the motor off, you can cool the motor down with an electric water pump and keep it spinning. If you have a mechanical pump, the thing has to sit there and idle, but in doing that, it also has temperature. So if you're trying to get, something lined up with the water temperature and the oil temperatures, it's easier to have some kind of adjustment. So that can make it problematic. And like I said, also the thing's always cold. And so that's not, I don't think that that's ideal. I mean, you could get power numbers, but it's not that great. The other thing, it's hard to see from here, but if you know anything about blow-off valves, the blow-off valve that's on there is a really cheap low flowing one that was prone to not working. So it's just something that I had, I think, that was attached to one of the tubes. And it was a horrible thing. In fact, we just ended up sealing it and not using a blow off valve because it was just so frustrating and not working that we said, okay, yeah, we're not doing this. And we just sealed it shut. And we did that by unbolting it and just sticking something over the hole and then clamping it back down. And basically it was just a solid, a solid gasket. The other thing that it should be evident if you look at this photo is that the wastegate is 90 degrees to the flow, to the exhaust flow. And that's not ideal. So you got a tube going up and down on the wastegate sticking out to the side. What usually happens is guys end up having to put another one on there or just go with a much bigger than needed wastegate if the wastegate isn't positioned in the direction of the flow. That's ideal, that the direction of flow goes and then turns up to the turbo, and where it turns, you got the wastegate sitting there in that turn, and then you have priority going to the wastegate, and then it's really effective at what it's doing. You get away with a smaller wastegate by doing that, by positioning it correctly, but having it 90 degrees, which is when you see lots of turbo kits on all kinds of things, not just Hemis or LSs or big blocks, all of them, that's fairly common, and that gets done a lot. And that's a mistake. That's not great. But when we made this turbo kit, that's just what we did. That's the way that it came out. Not ideal, not great, but for what we were doing, it, like I said, it worked. I think it had a rising boost curve, which we weren't too concerned with because we were kind of looking for a big number with that particular turbo. And also we had a turbo Hemi, so that we counted that as a win rather than we had the proper kind of turbo Hemi like we should have had. So there were a few things that I look back on those and go, yeah, that could have done better. We could have made. I don't know that the power would have been any different. I think we ran this thing over 1,000 horsepower. I don't know that would have been any different, but it's better sometimes to do it right. So let's see what you guys got going on. Modesto's in the house. Love watching the videos. And we're here. Let's go. Lunchbox is in the house. I'm looking at a 14 Challenger at 5.7 with a lifter tick. I need you to talk me out of it. Well, a lifter swap is easy because you're going to put a cam in it anyway. So you might as well put lifters in it too. I like Challengers a lot. I love dual spark plug engines. That's one thing I don't like about Hemis is dual plug Hemis. Plug changes are expensive on those. And who has dual plug money? I have studied every on dual spark engines. I'm a nerd. I maybe rephrase that so I can understand it. Richard, awesome channel. Good evening from Redlands. Nice. In other words, it's replacing the stock turbo, the GT45 I have on a shelf. Too much turbo for a 6-liter Power Stroke. Is which one? The GT45? The GT45 is about a 750 horsepower turbo kind of thing. I don't know that it's going to be ideally sized. Maybe it would actually be better on a diesel, because that turbo is a little bit soft on a gas engine. So maybe if you have more, you got a bigger motor, maybe it will work. I don't think I've ever seen anybody try one on a diesel application. I want the 8.1 intake and cam. If you haven't sold them, I haven't had anybody step up yet. So if you are interested, send me an email, Mike. Big Mike. Sorry about that. Big Mike. not the regular Mike. Richard, I posted 3 shorts today of a car I'm detailing, and the videos are getting a lot of views in a few minutes. I had over 200 views on each. That's crazy. That's cool. Keep doing what you're doing, man. What kind of car was it? Oh, okay. It's a cool car. 57 Plymouth Sport Fury. Nice. Was in the barn for 14 years. Very nice. I just finished watching all of the episodes of Dark Winds, which is about Border Patrol and Indian Reservation, like law enforcement stuff. And the cool thing is it's back in time, and they have all of these cool cars, including Plymouth Furies and stuff, which is kind of cool. Because that's more what I look for. Like, are they true to the cars that were there during that time period? Is the idea behind the new comp LST cam more duration, less lift, or is there any other magic? I don't know if that was their thing. The low shock thing is, I don't know if it's just lift, because there's other things that you can do to the lobe design that stops or limits, reduces shock. And I don't know what their definition of shock is. I don't know if it's bounce or loft or what kind of thing that they're exactly trying to control. Good times, good times. Dino King, 4.7 PowerTech V8 for the win. Okay. I've heard about those a lot. I've heard a few people talk about those, but I don't think I've ever seen one in the flesh. Tunes cost so much, even oil change is obscene. On the Hemi, an oil change is a lot. What makes the oil change on, or you're just saying in general? Because I would agree with that. 16 of the good NGK plugs are expensive. I agree with that. Just picked up a 2019 392 Hemi, going at a 62 Falcon. Oh, that'll be cool. I like those Falcons. What's a Truck Plus equivalent for the 5.7 Hemi? If you look at Hemi cams and you see something that's 219 degrees at 50 on the intake, that's going to be close to a Truck Plus. Have you ever run a turbo on Ford 6.2 fuel spark plug engine? Like what's in the old Raptor? I've never run a Raptor engine. I've never even seen one run. I don't know that I've ever even seen one run on a chassis dyno. But my guess is that whatever power it makes NA, it follows the formula. Send a message, use the contact form on the website. Should I use your Gmail? Did you have a question? The cams are in stock now. The T4 G42s are there. If you want one, you better get one fast, because I think that there were a lot of back orders on that. And there's probably not a whole bunch available. Blow-off valves and wastegates, I think, came in. Dark Winds is an awesome show. So was Duster. Funny car guy shows for car spotting. Yeah, it is cool. Lots of the GM Suburbans. Res cars. That's it. Autolite Cobbers work good in Gen 3 Hemis, and they're cheap. Dark Winds had some good early 70s, late 60s vibe to it. Yeah. Sent you a message on your website. Couldn't remember the email. Here, Big Mike, I'll put it down. There. There's my emails. I'm looking to buy a turbo, but I don't think you have one small enough for a little 4-cylinder. What 4-cylinder is it, and how much power are you trying to make? I was inquiring about a Truck Plus test cam. Oh, okay. I think I have one left still. Building a 408 Gen 3 LS. What turbo combo would be best to make 1200 flywheel horsepower, and what would be the best fuel pump to run E85? Are you wanting to do a single or twins? We have twin image 3076s that we just got in that would be good. A K24E 450 plus. The 3076 would probably be good on a 2.4 liter. Disco Potato. A Disco Potato I don't think is going to get you to 450. Isn't that going to be more like 350? Is this a good cam? Summit Racing Pro LS camshafts. Summit makes good stuff. It's not that all their cams are good or all their cams are bad, or anybody's cams are all good or all bad. You have to decide on what cam is right for the thing that you're trying to get done. I have a disco potato, not even considered putting it on. Yeah, it's probably too small. I mean, it's not bad from back in the day, but it's there's better stuff. What do you mean that turbo is soft? A GT 45 is soft down low relative to its size and displacement. I mean, its power output, let's say. I've used them a lot. I think I still have 2 of them. And I've used them and tested with them a lot. We did so much testing with the new 3584 RS is because we were looking for a turbo, and all you do is look for later generations, modern generations, newer generations. That we were looking for a turbo that would do what that one did and hopefully be a lot more responsive. And then also as a side benefit was capable of making more power. So it's better everywhere. And that's what we were able to do. Email sent, plan a machine intake for injectors and put twin 7875s in my 8.1. Ooh, that'll be sporty. If you run a GM Atlas engine. Yeah, 4200. I have videos up on the 4200, but not a 37. Not there yet. It's not up yet. The San Xavier Indian Reservations, where we got all our 55 Chevy sedans in the 80s. They were free to get out of their yards. Wow. That's cool. Lots of the older American iron stuff in Cuba too, I think. But yeah, I like looking at those old cars. Like I loved watching a movie. It's called Hidden Figures, about the women who worked on the worked at NASA. And I loved when they'd show the establishing shots and stuff of like the parking lot, because you could see all kinds of cool cars. I always look for Nash Metropolitans. The res held together with baling wire usually. That's okay. That's what sloppy is, right? Is Gen 3 Hemi a good motor to run boost on? 83% saying yes. Yeah, Hidden Figures was really good. Yeah, amazing stuff. Why am I getting an email about gold? they must not understand very well. Regarding the poll, every motor is good for boost except the Iron Duke. I think the Iron Duke is one of them that I would kind of want to do. I know I don't think Dan likes them, and everybody they're much maligned. What problems do they have? I'm gonna guess that they didn't have enough ring gap for guys running boost on them. I mean, they're not a quad 4, but I didn't catch you read my comment. I didn't see the 3076 on the website. If it's not up yet. Nash should be a great sleeper, especially a new Turbo K series and all-wheel drive. Yeah, that's not what I would want to do. The thing is very narrow and very short wheelbase. It would be not my choice for making something fast. But what I would want to do is I would want the outside to be all stock, and maybe even the interior be all stock, because it definitely would want a convertible one. But I would want like a twin cam, like a 4AG Toyota and like a 5-speed in it, because that would be more than enough. And I don't even know that. I mean, I probably would want a turbo one just because I like turbo stuff, but even one with just like stack injection on or something, just so that it has good eyeball appeal. Alice 4.6, yeah, that is a 4. I mean, the 4.2 is a 6-cylinder. The 3700, the 3.7 is a 5-cylinder. The bottom end's fragile on the Duke. Any plans to run a Nissan VK? They call it Coyote Performance at 5.3 prices. Yeah, I think an LS already does that. The 3076 is about a 700 horsepower turbo. Albert has a great story about towing a car that was broke down on the reservation. When he hooked up the tow rope, he looked through the grill and there was no engine in the car. The problem with a 5.6 and why you could never compare, not an LS, is that there are no parts for it. There's no aftermarket intakes. There's no cams. I mean, there might be some, but there's not like 8 bajillion cams like there is, or cylinder heads, or stroker kits, or all of things that you have that the LS enjoys, and to a much lesser extent that the Coyote guys also can enjoy. Got to run, drop a like, guys. It's free. There's no charge. There's no charge for hitting the like button. How much power does a stock turbo 5.7 Hemi make? If I remember right, a stock 5.7 Hemi, the early ones that we ran, like I think the one that I ran from the Ram was an 06. And so it made, I want to say it made like, I think it made like 380 or something the way that we run it. And over 400 foot-pounds. Dodge Hemi 5.7. Not that one. Hemi header test. No. Yeah, that's not it. Yeah, I think it was 380 or something. I'd have to go back and look at it might be under the turbo stuff. Let's see here. Hemi turbos. Holder turbo 5.7. $377 and 420 foot-pounds. This one was 382 and 420 foot-pounds. Yep, mine like a steel trap. There's a turbo for every engine. Let's see. There's a turbo for every engine. The hard part is the fuel system and tuning. That's all that stopped me from making my car undrivable for a few weeks. All right. Had an Iron Duke and 85 Camaro. And drove from Colorado to San Diego, 115 miles an hour. Can't be that fragile. Never came out of red line. Drove to Chicago afterwards. So you're saying you averaged 115 from Colorado to San Diego? That's quite a drive. 380, that was turbo. Do you remember? The 380 was no turbo. 380 was stock. All we did was, I think it may have had headers on it or something. But it's rated at 345. But it made 380 because we ran it with no accessories. We ran it with an open exhaust. We ran it with an open throttle body, no air intake. We ran it with an optimized tune. We ran it colder than you normally do. So they make more power the way that we run them NA than they're rated at. And then we added boost to it. And so the boost is at 14.7 pounds. It would make 387.60. Been thinking of 3582R or 6262 Pulsar, but don't really know. I'd rather support you than someone else. I think you'd be much happier with a 3076 on that motor than a 3584. I mean, a 3582. What I would recommend for that. What's not to like about 151 cubic inch straight 4? I asked you some stuff about my 383, 254, 264. Remember that? Yep. Be getting enforcer heads using 850-80 carb. What stall would you run? You're going to need like a 3000 stall on that. The red line on the Iron Duke was 4500. I don't think that they put a red line in it because they were concerned with the metallurgy or the parts of the bottom end. I think that they did that because that's where the motor made power. So whatever cam they put in it and whatever intake design that they used on it, all the way Colorado, San Diego, foot on the floor, temp never got above 180. Were you out in the middle of the desert or something? Usually the highway patrol and stuff don't really like people doing that. It's hard to do that for a really long period of time and then not also run out of gas. I know that having run the Silver State. And in less than 90 miles, I ran out of fuel. Although I did have a supercharged Mustang too. We were using a lot of fuel. And not getting exceptional fuel mileage. Duke is a low RPM torque motor. That's why it has a low red line. They're gutless above 3,500. Yeah, I would imagine that they are. Is the Iron Duke a throttle body injected motor too? My model of car needs a surge tank and better brakes would be non-negotiable on my model of car. 13-inch rotors, 3-inch pads. Okay. Big brakes are a plus. Big brakes are much more important than the power. Any of you ever build a 63 GMC 305 V6 for performance? I have not. I think I have seen one of those at the wrecking yard. It was out already and sitting by the fence, but I've never done anything with it. The 2.5 Duke is TBI. Okay. How long was the Silver? The Silver State's 91 or 92 miles. Ford, in their infinite wisdom, made the caliper integral to the knuckle. Does that not facilitate you doing like a brake upgrade? Is that difficult? You believe they spanned carb and TBI? The TBI would usually be the next thing that they would do from a carbureted combination. And oftentimes the motor, they didn't change it. Other than putting, oh, look, we modernized it with fuel injection, which sometimes was not a step in the right direction. I have a running 305 V6 in my 64 C10. If you'd like to dyno one. Yes, TBI single injector. Okay. So then it just needs a manifold with 2 of those on there, right? And then boost, right? That's all that's needed. Because if anything needs, like the lower horsepower things really need the boost. Like I really wanted to do my VX Civic. The Silver State was fun. You couldn't run flat out the whole time because there are turns there. And there's one section that are posted for like 30 or 40 miles an hour. So they're definitely a lot slower than like flat out. So some of them could be taken flat out. Some of them could be seen. Some of them are blind hills and stuff. So you're not really, unless you've run the thing a whole bunch, you don't really know what's going on. So you look at course notes and stuff. It's better to be, there's so much room there to go fast. So it's better to be cautious, but you can go really fast there. And it was definitely fun. I kind of shudder to think on how fast things can go, because making the power is, so much easier now. 7793, so they definitely came with carbs earlier. Yeah, it makes sense. Can a cam make up for a long runner intake on top, or is a short runner just always better for top end? a bigger cam can, it's going to shift the effectiveness, actually the initiation of the reflected wave. It's going to change it a little bit, but the runner length, it still has to go up, and the reflected wave still has to travel up and back, and that distance hasn't changed. So it's still going to take that amount of time. And so at higher RPM, it's not going to be effective. Short runner is going to be effective at higher RPM because it takes less time for that wave to travel there. Skirting on the block is pretty thin on the Duke. You guys have tried turboing them. They survive 5 or 7 pounds, much above that, your brake stuff. Will 243 heads be restrictive on a 441? Stock ones definitely would be. 243 heads are, I would argue, are restrictive on a 500 horsepower 5.3. So definitely on a 6-liter and definitely on a 441, depending on how much power you're trying to make. But not ported ones. You can have ported ones that flow 320 or 330 CFM, and those will be better on a 441. I don't know how much power you're trying to make with it. If you were in an unfamiliar area and needed machine work done, like boring, honing, balancing, is there anything specific you look for in a machine shop if you had ample options? You could go online, I guess, and look up to see if if people talking about it, are they leaving good reviews, or is any of that stuff available? You could try that. You could talk to them and ask them a few questions. See how you get a feel, ask them to talk to another customer. I mean, you could be super nosy and do that stuff. Otherwise, when you're doing something for the first time, you're kind of taking your chance. Of course, you go live right as I leave the house. That's what happens. We did that on purpose. We were waiting for you to leave. What's good for low end power on a 4200 Atlas? Is that a reliable engine? I'd like to do a little porting on the heads and headers, maybe boost eventually. Yeah, those things, porting on the head is not going to pick up low end power. Headers might. Boost definitely will, depending on how you size your turbo or your blower or whatever you're doing. That motor has a pretty good power curve, though. It's pretty effective for given its displacement. It's got a good cylinder head on it. And they love boost. Just ask Calvin. At what point do you think forged pistons would be needed versus factory pistons with ring gap and good fueling? If you're going to put a turbo on it, you definitely need a ring gap. And then the tune becomes critical after that. And unfortunately, I don't know what the strength limit is on that motor's pistons because I haven't run testing on that, so I don't know. You can get away with a whole bunch more than you think. Like we went from, the motors rated at 300 horsepower, we went to 1500 with the stock stuff on an LS. So I don't think I think if you have ring gap in it and the tune is right and you use good fuel and use an intercooler and stuff, I think you can make a lot of power with that. If you had to pick for a large 6x6 truck, would you go for a 12-valve Cummins or a DT3? What's a DT360 International? I don't even know what that is. Evening, I saw the Hemi video you did. I have an 0957 OEM Hellcat Red Eye cam top end, Torque Storm supercharger with a whole set turbo on the stand, ring gap, first trying this engine. You're running a Torque Storm supercharger and the whole set? It's an interesting compound setup. I haven't seen too many people do that because the Torque Storm it's a rising boost curve, so it's not normally what people choose to get a turbo spooled up. But I'm all for people using the things that they have laying around because I've done that a lot. That's how the compound turbo stuff came to be. That's how this turbo Hemi came to be. We had that turbo already from the guys at Comp Turbo, and then I also had a like a CEA 7675, I thought it was from Precision, which is I use that turbo for a lot of stuff. Yep, we just wanted to see what it will do in space concerns and hood clearance. No, I get it. That's good. Everyone's going to yell at you for not doing a Hellcat blower, but use what you got, man. The DT360 was International's direct equivalent to the 5.9 Cummins. 5.9 direct injected engines made medium duty applications. Yeah, I'm not at all familiar with those. I'm the wrong guy. I had a Cummins in the Dodge truck that I have, and I love that. That's my only exposure to that. At which point does one submit to the Boss 260 being a good deal? They're cheaper than any LS engine in Australia. They're 260 kilowatts, 350 horsepower, basically a Navigator 5.4 valve. That I would think that that's a good engine. I mean, I think people would love to have that here, especially if it has the cool intake on it. Yes, Hemi. I have a 5.7 Hemi in my Charger RT. I'd love to add boost. I have a cam ready to put in it. Can you give me your option, maybe opinion, on how it might react or show on the dyno? Yeah, if you can tell me what the lift and duration at 50 is, and then the LSA, I can give you an idea. I've run a few Hemi cams. Well, Prestige, it sounds like you know way more than I do about those two motors. So you're probably much better at picking that than I am, because I am not familiar with the diesel stuff. All the bosses have the cool intake. I really like those boss intakes. I remember testing one, and one of the guys, I think it might have been the guys from Sullivan, had one that they got from Australia. He's like, no, you can't lose this, and you can't steal it, and you can't. I'm like, dude, don't worry about it. I said, come to the dyno with me, and I'll just run it, and I'll just give it back to you. I said, it's just cool. Guys are going to want to see it and want to see the test on it. I said, but that doesn't mean that I want it. I had a built 462 valve in my Mustang. Going from a 7665 to a 7675 was a huge difference. Oddly sounded better, just felt more strong overall. It was probably not as responsive, I would imagine. Made 700 on 17 pounds. That would seem to be about right for that applied 462 valve. Or should I put a big block Ford or 6.2 in it? The big block Ford I would know something about, but having never tested a 6.2, I don't know about that. The later Boss 315 and 335 Miami had an even cooler Harrop 1900 intake. Was the Harrop one was it a blower? I'm going to put an Eaton 10-speed behind whatever it is. Okay. Well, what are you doing with the diesel powered thing? Are you just towing stuff with it? Because if you are, I mean, I don't. Isn't a Cummins a good thing to have for that? Totally off subject. How do you feel about using an EFI sniper with a root style blower? Are you talking about like a 4-hole throttle body thing? Is that what you're talking about? It's the same as using a carburetor with it, except that you have a little bit more control over the fuel flow. Will the aluminum 6.1 Hemi fit on a later 5.7? I don't know about the later ones. We did run the 6.1 Hemi on the earlier 5.7 stuff a lot. I have lots of tests we did with that. Yeah, on a 302 Ford. Okay. Yeah, what roots blower are you putting on a 302? My cam for my charger is a 220, 230 at 50, lift at 605, LSA is 112. Yeah, that cam will work fine. I've probably have run the 220 cam on a Hemi, I'm sure. Four valve, 5.4 navigating adapters make Coyote 5.0 intake superchargers work for cheap. Weak factory rods and expensive cams are the problem. Well, if you're like the Coyote guys, then you don't ever change the cams. I remember watching a video. I think it was Street Alpha. One of the guys they interviewed, the guy was saying, "Yeah, you don't cams do nothing for Coyotes." I'm like, what? Yeah, that's not a thing. I have an Australian 5.4 with a Cobra R intake. I have run a Cobra R before. Mahovitz had one. Those are really cool. If the injectors in it can support the power, it should work. It's like 2,000 Australian to do cams and valve springs. Yeah. That is the problem with 4 cam stuff is it is expensive to do cams. Do you have any idea how it may run for the street daily use or turbo response to that cam? Yeah, the 220 cam will be fine in a 5.7. It'll be like our Truck Plus, but in a 5.7. I have reservations about running big boost on a plastic intake, 12 psi max on plastic. The plastic and the boost thing don't go together unless there's something specific about that intake manifold. Because we've run lots of boost on factory plastic LS manifolds. Going for in the neighborhood of 40,000 pound GVW. But you can make more than 40. Factory supercharged Coyote in 2010 in Australia. Oh, very cool. My plastic PI intake on the 4.6 never had an issue for years. Yeah, we ran. I know we ran 20 plus on 4.6 2 valve stuff. Stingray or GT350 FG hood scoop for what? Fred. Navigator 5.44 valve will accept 5.0 Coyotes with adapter plates. Yep. I've seen guys do that. But I've not seen a test on that to see how the 5.44 valve fares with Coyote intakes relative to other intakes. Because I know that when we've done adapters on things in the past, every time I've done adapters on things, they've made less power. Unless the adapter is just a bolt pattern change and it's not jogging the port or dramatically changing the shape of the port, i.e. the rec port, cathedral port, stuff that they do for LSA blowers, and guys try to run LS3 intake manifolds on there. Going the other way, which I don't know why you would go put a cathedral port manifold on a rec port head, which would be a mistake with a factory LS3 intake being so good. We did on the 4 valve stuff, guys had adapters that allowed us to run 5-liter Ford manifolds on those too, but the same thing, they just didn't make very good power, I think, because of the adapters. E-force for a Ford 5-liter. What's the best intake for torque on a Gen 3 Hemi? The 6 one is not the best one. The best one is what I call the Magnum intake manifold. The beer keggy one looks like the aluminum SRT8, but it's a composite version of that they used in cars. The truck one's also good. It just doesn't look as good. But the best one is that plastic manifold, a long runner plastic manifold that they use on the Gen 3 Hemis, but in cars. Magnum. I think we call them Magnum intakes. I was technically gaining horsepower at the peak wind cam, but losing the variable cam. I don't know what that is. Stuck with the dilemma of going big to get the most out of cams. Yeah, I don't, on a 4-valve motor, I don't think, I tend to not go real big on the cams anyways. I had one burst on a Neon 2-liter plastic intake, 25 years old. The only time I've ever seen composite intake manifolds break, I've never seen one break under boost. Excuse me. I have seen them break when they have backfires, particularly nitrous backfires. An Edelbrock E-Force is a cool blower. Ever test anything on a Jaguar 4-liter V8? I have not. I have seen those in wrecking yards, but I've never run one. Do a Boss Power Bulge, either a BA XR8 or FG XR8. Yes, to boost on the Hemi. Why not? Yeah, you should boost it. You just have to put ring gap in it. And back in the day when the Gen 3 Hemi got such a bad rap for, oh, those pistons are made of glass. I remember I must have had 50 people tell me that. Oh, you can't run boost on those. Those pistons are made of glass. They'll just break. I'm like, I'm thinking that they won't. And it turns out, I mean, the top ringland is not as thick as an LS or other pistons. So ultimately, it is going to be a little weaker. But the reason that they were blowing them up is because they didn't have ring gap in any of these things. And they also weren't able to tune it very well back then. They didn't have tunes, and they were trying to run NA timing under boost, which is not a good idea. When you revisit the 4.6, you should test the new Summit 2-valve intake. Summit has a 2-valve intake? VVT makes a broad torque curve. Yes, it does. There are plenty of factory intakes with composite intake manifolds. Yes, there are. How do you feel about the 6.4 active runner intake? That seems neat. I must have that Magnum intake you talk about on my Charger. You probably do. Wish there was more options like the small block Chevys. I love long runner torque. Yeah, that one that you have is really good. I have videos up where we tested those. We tested that and the truck and the SRT8. The active runner intake is cool. I did run one of those. I thought it was not on a 6.4, though. I thought it was on a 5.7 because the guys at Motor Trend had a 5.7 with that variable runner intake manifold. And I think they also had variable cam on it. So, you got to play with all kinds of stuff, which is better, obviously, because then you go, oh yeah, long runner's really good up top. Yeah, if I had both of those, that would be good. 86% versus 14 on the yes side. The Hemi's good. Got 2 more minutes. Did a good ride today. Got to see lots of quail. They were flying around. I think I did a little over 10 miles on the bike today. It's nice when you go out and it feels good. With engine swaps, I like the idea of an engine that looks like it's super low in the engine bay. It has lots of room in front, kind of like a rotary, but a V8. It is nice to have extra room, and it is nice to not have the front accessory drive nearly touching the radiator. It's better to be able to have a full shroud and all that. When you put ring gap in, do you just go to max acceptable on the FSM, or how do you figure out how much you need? You need 6 to 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. So whatever your bore size is multiplied by 0.0065, or even 0.06 is fine. Are you using factory coils in all your tests? On all of my LS stuff, even the Big Bang stuff, that's all factory LS3 coils. In fact, the same. On the Hemi, we use factory Hemi coil packs. Should I swap my Hemi into my Firebird and ditch the 350 TPI? A Hemi, even a stock Hemi, makes a lot more than a tune port motor does. But it's not going to be easy. Do you like Audi and have the accessories in front of the headlights? Yep. Room for activities is always good. Just to be able to get down to stuff. One of the things I hate about working on cars, especially working on cars like on the car and not just on the engine dyno, is it's never like unbolting a water pump or whatever. It's really easy. I mean, like on an LS, that's like 6 bolts, but it's all the other stuff that you got to get to it. And the same, like, that's why I haven't fixed the water pump in the Omni. I'm like, there's a lot of stuff, and it's so crowded there that it's not conducive for that. Room for a V-mount radiator. Yeah. Like the Cobra Daytona was like that. Need an RHP active runner intake for Recport LS. Yeah, that would be good. That'd be really expensive. Although I think if I remember right, a Hemi and an LS, at least on the exhaust ports, are really, really close. And so maybe the intake ports are close enough, or you could run that active runner intake on an LS. We should try that and see how close it is. What do you think about high performance coil packs? I've never seen a necessity for a coil pack having used the coils, the factory coils on all of my stuff up to and beyond 1500. So my thing is that if I can do that, it's going to do what I need for anything else. There are a couple things that you have to do. Is you have to run really tight plug gap, like 18 or 19. I've seen guys go even lower than that. And then also you have to be able to adjust the dwell to the coil. So yeah, on the Holly, we can adjust that. I don't know if that's available. If somebody let me know if you can adjust the dwell on a factory ECU. Do coil packs have heat sinks on them? Some of them do. Some of the LS truck ones do. Add more gap even on an OEM turbo engine. I would if you're planning on going way up in boost. And it'd be interesting to check the OEM engine, because my guess is it doesn't have a lot of gap in it. Looks like an engine bays are the worst. Themselves are kind of a pain to work on, because I think that when they put them together, at least from the engineers that I've met from Volkswagen, from doing the Bonneville projects, that they think that it's perfect, that you'll never have to work on it. I don't know why you're worried about this. I'm like, well, we have to work on it. We have to take the motor out. So why is it like this? Why is there no access to the things that we need access to? Well, you should never have to work on it. I'm like, we're working on it right now. So, there's that. The race cars are pretty cool. With an Escort RS, I like those. And Volkswagen does know how, at least the Audi stuff, they do know how to win. They know how to win Le Mans a whole bunch of times with diesel engines. Can I increase runner length by just making spacers to create length between the intake port and the intake manifold? Yeah, that's the same thing. I was thinking about doing that on my dad's Jeep. The Summit intake is supposedly an upgrade over the stock PI, but it's a direct fit. Also gets rid of the little bit of plastic under the aluminum crossover. So is it just a Dorman piece that they had made or something? Is it somehow supposed to be better? 6.4 Hemi has 330 CFM heads. Are those Apache, or I don't remember what the other one is. Mild porting goes to 380. They just don't seem to make horsepower the numbers would suggest versus LS3 base builds. LS2 coil packs are the go. Okay. That bit of plastic under the crossover frequently leaks. Yeah, I've seen that part of it, but I'm talking about like running them on the dyno. We don't care about that. We don't care if it leaks, because junkyard motors leak anyway. And if it leaks outside, we don't care about that. It drips water down. I don't care about that. Like water pumps or whatever. That's not a big deal. But does it do anything to power? Is the new design better? Does it make more power? I don't know if an LS2 coil pack is the same as an LS3. The ones that we use came off of an LS3 crate motor. I only know that because it's the only LS3 crate motor that I was ever provided by GM. LS3 King in the power to weight wars. Got 1 minute after after several minutes have gone by. It's made in-house by Summit, completely different from the Dorman. I'd like to see. I don't know that Summit. I don't think even has production capability. I'll ask. I'll talk to Brian and ask him about that. It's only worth upgrading if you're swapping from. Yeah, I would agree with that. And on that note, on that agreement, it is time to go. But I'll see you guys all tomorrow.